Hi guys, welcome to TSK. This is Kimberly here. Super happy you could be here. So tonight's subject is prejudice. So I picked this subject because it's clearly one that pertains to our lives today, right? So you look around and there's not a whole lot of factual discussions going on, but a lot of heightened emotionality. Doesn't it seem that way? So when we're looking at the news or we're even discussing things with people, it seems as though there's a lot of trigger happy. I don't mean that literally. I just mean from an emotional place. That people are very quick to react to different groups. So that's why I thought it was an interesting subject to bring up, because it seems like it is a very one that's around us and that we're experiencing on an everyday basis. So the thing I found interesting when I started looking this up and started doing some research on prejudice is that it is universal. I thought that was kind of really interesting, right? So it's everywhere. It's a universal human experience. So anywhere you go, to any corner of the earth, people will be this way. Isn't that fascinating? So including, I thought this was interesting for people like myself who might think I'm too intelligent to be prejudiced. They actually did studies saying that people of low cognitive ability and people of high cognitive ability are equally prejudiced. They're just prejudiced against different groups. Right? So it's a universal human experience. We all have this tendency, right? So I guess the next question is why? Why do we have this tendency to dislike certain people? Coming back around, we'll just define what it means to be prejudiced. So I put a couple of definitions together, and this is what I came up with. That a preconceived opinion, usually a dislike or a hostility, not based on reason or actual experience. So a preconceived opinion, usually a dislike or hostility, that's not based on reason or actual experience. So not based on reason or actual experience. So that's interesting, right? So we seem to want, by that definition, it seems as though that we have some kind of desire in us to want to be prejudiced. Because if it's not based on reason, we are creating this essentially out of nothing, right? And that's actually what has been found. So a couple things that I found that were interesting. Two studies in particular. One was this notion of difference, right? So I guess that comes up pretty quickly when you start to think about prejudice. Probably one of the first words that comes up is difference. So that person, right, is different from me. They have different qualities from me. Therefore, it's foreign to me and I don't like it. It rubs me the wrong way. And that's kind of the sensation, right? It kind of rubs us the wrong way. That person just, for whatever reason, that group, I don't know, something about it doesn't sit well with me. So this study was about difference and about specifically social deviance. So they found that babies at 6 months old preferred auditory consistency. They did not like dissonance in sounds. They proved at 1 year old, at 12 months old, a baby prefers vertical symmetry to asymmetry. So we have a preference, a biological preference to patterns, to consistency. So isn't that fascinating? I thought that was so interesting. Then they went on, later studies went on to prove that there's actually covariance between that impulse and social deviance. So they found actually there was a correlation between how much a person, and this started at 6 years old, which is also an interesting topic for maybe another podcast, why that starts around 6 and not earlier. They found that when someone had a heightened, the amount, I should say, of dislike or annoyance or discomfort they felt in looking at visual deviance. So it could be, for instance, an example was a circle made out of dots with one dot ajar that cut open the circle, right? So the amount that someone that image made them uncomfortable, that amount correlated to how uncomfortable they were with social deviance. And that included visual social deviance and also action-based. So, for instance, one example of visual social deviance would be if everyone was one skin tone and then there was one person or a few people with a different skin tone. That would be a social deviance, or even behavior. So if everybody's acting the same way and then a few people or one person is acting differently, that would be behavioral social deviance. Crazy, right? So they actually showed that there was a correlation between the two. So meaning people are going to be, well, I guess this is drawing a little bit of a strong conclusion, but you could conclude that then there's some people who are predisposed to being more prejudiced simply on the basis that this makes that deviance makes them uncomfortable. Some kind of like mental rigidity, right? That they prefer patterns and that they actually get a physical sensation and it's actually bothersome to them. So I thought that was really fascinating. The second thing that I came across was what I assumed right away about this topic, which was the us and them theory. And that theory in science is called the social identity theory. So this is a self-esteem based theory. And what I thought was interesting about this was that it was more focused on the us than the them, meaning on the group orientation, or the group, the sense of needing to be in a group. So a gentleman named Tajvel, his study proved that not only do we form groups very easily and we have a tendency to form groups, but that once our individual identity is tied to the group, we tend to see those not in the group as them in some way. Or, them, but also less than in some way. So you have to think about that. So he's saying once our identity is tied to a group, we see those not in the group as less than in some way. So we could easily see those people in another group as just in another group, right? But we don't. We see them as less than. Wow, that's crazy town. So he went on to conclude that also, as conflict arises, we lose our ability to see individual traits in people outside of our group. We tend to see them more as them, quote unquote, more and more as conflict arises. So I thought that was crazy town. I thought that was so fascinating and did, explain a lot of human history, right? So the reason I brought this topic up and the reason why I wanted to discuss it is because it seems as though the conflict has been arising in our society, and that conflict is a loss of sense of self. So as our group identities have been waning, right? So as, we lose our identity as a mother or as, a Christian or a breadwinner, as we lose these identities, the group identities that are left become more and more important to our sense of self. So when someone threatens that, we come out with a vengeance, right? There's literally a barbaric, there's a sense that we're under attack, that we might be annihilated. Don't you get that sense when people are talking, the fervor, the volatility that comes up when someone, questions these group identities? Wow, it's so intense. So that's my theory as to why that is because facts, as Tajvel found out, there is no basis of difference. because he set out to find what is the baseline difference that there needs to be between two groups in order for this prejudice to take hold, right? That would be a logical experiment to do. And he found out that there is no baseline. So meaning there doesn't need to be any difference at all. There just needs to be a separate group. So he could literally put people in random groups, and they could know that they were in random groups, that they were picked at random with no traits or qualities that bound them to the group. And they would still show preference to their group. Which comes to the conclusion as well, or one of the conclusions that was brought out as well, is that we will actually forego our own individual needs or wants or in favor of the group identity. So we will go out of our way to save the group identity versus saving ourselves. I mean, that's simplified, but you understand what I'm saying. So anyway, this is a fascinating subject. Thanks so much for listening. Talk tonight was about prejudice. Yeah, have a wonderful evening. This is TSK, Kimberly, never far.